And joining us now is author, educator, and independent Middle East strategic intelligence analyst and former intelligence official, Avi Melamed. Avi, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the North. Just back from key talks in Washington, Defense Minister Gallant says that diplomacy is preferred. The IDF says it's ready for an operation in Lebanon. Some members of the cabinet say war should be initiated by Israel now. Where are we at?
We are at the same place we've been for the last couple of months. It seems like both sides, Israel and Hezbollah, has no interest in really dragged into a whole-out war. So we hear all those things from both sides, by the way. Each side is basically claiming that it's fully ready for a full-scale war, but at the same time, it seems like that the same guiding line that basically guides the two sides since day one of the skirmish, namely to contain the skirmish within a field that is approved or agreed upon non-formally between the sides, that guiding line has not changed as for now.
Well, could you envision a situation where, in effect, the Gaza war winds down to a point that Hezbollah decides to simply stop firing into Israel? The cross-border attacks may just stop with or without a diplomatic agreement. Could that happen?
Well, Hezbollah's leader Nasrallah said since day one that once there is going to be a ceasefire in Gaza Strip, he will stop the fire. It seems like that recently there has been some messages coming from Hezbollah and the Iranians to Hamas, encouraging Hamas to move towards a deal, because in the end of the day, Hezbollah would like to conclude this chapter of skirmish with Israel, and I think it's also in Iranian interest. So right now you've got a very complex triangle, sort of speaking, including Hezbollah, Israel, and Hamas, and Iran in the background. And the whole thing is actually, to a large extent, dependent upon the trajectory of the Israeli-Hamas talks.
All right, so let's go specifically now to Gaza. The IDF is back operating in places like Shajia in Gaza City and other areas that we had already cleared months ago. Is the war really moving into a new phase, or just confronting terrorists wherever they appear?
I think that what we are looking at now is the phase of what we call mourning the long, sort of speaking, meaning that the major first phase that was involving a very significant shock and awe, sort of speaking, tactics, has been replaced with some more surgical operations on the ground. And what I see from time to time is that there is some sort of like a model where Israel, I don't know to say whether deliberately or not deliberately, is kind of like getting out from a specific area and then at some point, all of a sudden, by surprise, coming back to this area to do what I called before mourning the long. It seems to me like there is a pattern that is now evolving in the context of the skirmish between Israel and the remains of Hamas military structure in different parts of Gaza Strip, and it seems to me like that will be the pattern ahead as we are looking down the road.
Avi, finally this, I wanted to ask you about a Wall Street Journal report today on the so-called Israeli post-war vision that sees Gaza sliced into security zones and day-after proposals transforming its geography and governance. Is that plan workable?
I think it's very premature to talk about it. We needed the first thing. We have to remember something very significant. Hamas is not going to vanish. All the talks about eliminating Hamas is totally irrelevant. What we are looking at in the end of the day is an objective to limit as much as possible Hamas military capacities to continue and to dictate its radical agenda as it has been doing for the last 40 years. That calls for two major issues: to crush Hamas military spine, which is exactly what the IDF is doing for the last couple of months, and to move ahead in a trajectory that basically brings regional players as an envelope, sort of speaking, to build the scaffoldings to start building the conditions on the ground in Gaza towards the day after. But we are looking at a very complex, long-term process. I don't know that at this point we can describe it or talk about it in the way that the Wall Street basically was presenting it, but that would be, generally speaking, the general direction.
Avi Melamed, thank you so much for joining us today at ILTV.
Of course, thank you for having me.